Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to this occasion of 8th World Brain Day. As you may be aware, World Brain Day is observed on July 22nd of every year for the past 8 to 9 years from 2014. The sole aim of the World Brain Day is to raise public awareness and promote advocacy related to brain health. Each year, the focus is on specific neurological disorder, and I'm delighted that this year the theme is Stop Multiple Sclerosis. So, multiple sclerosis can be a debilitating neurological disorder that can occur at any age and can have profound impact on the patients as well as their family members, both physically, emotionally, socially, as well as financially. So, even though lots of research is going on, awareness and access to healthcare is still lagging behind in several parts of India as well as worldwide. So I invite Dr. Netravati, Additional Professor of Neurology and Multiple Sclerosis and other demyelinating disease specialist at NIMHANS, to give a brief introduction regarding the awareness of therapies for multiple sclerosis. Dr. Netravati.
A very good afternoon to everyone. Thanks, Vikram, for starting this. So we've all gathered today on this occasion of World Brain Day. And this year's theme is multiple sclerosis. So we have planned a panel discussion followed by a formal program. So before we start the panel discussion, I would want to briefly give awareness on MS and the available therapies. All of you are aware that this is an autoimmune disorder. So when we say autoimmune, basically what I want to tell is, most of the time, whenever we have a fever or a cold or a cough, what does our body do? It has some cells, which are called as helper cells, which try to see that the fever or the cold or the cough is counteracted and we become better. So that means there is a defense system, just like how we have soldiers at the war foot. Whenever required, we have the soldiers as a defense system, our immune system, which helps us in managing most of our disorders. So in multiple sclerosis, it's an autoimmune. That means these cells start targeting our own cells, and in MS, it targets the myelin sheath. So, for example, if I want to talk to you people or if I want to listen to you people, it is the nerves which carry the functions from the brain to my either a speech area or to my limb area. So this is the nerve which is there. So it has a coating called as a myelin. This can be likened, like for example, we have an electric wire. We have the electricity being carried out inside by the copper wire, and around that there is a plastic insulation. So similar to that, the protection is covered for our nerves, which is called as myelin. And in this MS, this protection, this covering, which is called as the myelin sheath, gets disrupted at different areas. So when it is disrupted, affecting the vision, or it may be in the balancing system, so based on that, the symptoms appear. So if you ask as to what are the reasons for multiple sclerosis, what causes MS, it's an acquired disorder. That means it's not a genetically mediated. Persons are genetically predisposed. This is different from a genetically acquired disorder. That means their immune system is predisposed that whenever there is a trigger, the trigger could be in the form of some infection or some injections, which can trigger this myelin breakdown and result in autoimmunity and multiple sclerosis. So the next slide shows on the course of multiple sclerosis. Basically, this we require when we need to know, like a clinician or a neurologist, if a person has to start a person with MS on treatment and tell how this person is going to respond to medication as well as to the further therapy. So we try to classify based on this. So that what you need to remember is most of us try to target if the illness will be present only in this purple and the red forms. Our target is to prevent the illness going to this orange line. So that is the reason we try to say that whenever we start treatment, let it be early so that you do not go into this orange curve. So again, emphasize on the same thing, why we need to start early. basically what happens is our body, though there is an autoimmunity, again there is a defense mechanism to see that we counter attack that. So in the initial stages, we start the medications, we try to halt so that we don't go into that orange phase. What do I mean by orange phase? Basically, in MS, we have two aspects. One is where we can control the inflammation, which is called as relapsing remitting. And the second one, which is called as the progressive, that is the orange lines which I was talking about. So our aim is to see that you do not go into that. MS, if I have to take the incidence, basically what we have to remember is you take 1 lakh people, among them 5 of them can have multiple sclerosis. Slightly common during the second decade and more common in females compared. So how do I recognize the symptoms? It can be just a loss of balance or a weakness, trying to hold on to something or trying to grip a chappal, or some numbness because of which you are not able to do any activity, or it can be dizziness or visual dysfunction. So when I say this, many of you may think that I would have experienced most of these symptoms one time or the other. So what I want to say is this can happen in multitude of diseases. Even when I'm exhausted, I may feel all this. So never diagnose based on this symptom. Go to a physician or a neurologist so that you are diagnosed with multiple. You are diagnosed correctly. As well as there are many neurological disorders which can mimic multiple sclerosis. So we should be aware of that so that we go to the neurologist or the physician or the doctor so that you are diagnosed correctly and treated. Treatment is initiated. So these are the common MS symptoms which I showed. Apart from that, fatigue is one thing which is very classical of MS. Basically, the person feels that they're too exhausted. They don't have weakness, they don't have numbness, nothing. Everything okay physically, but they feel a lot of fatigue, which is very characteristic of multiple sclerosis. Apart from that, spasticity, especially when it affects the lower limbs. And you can also have emotional problems, mood dysfunction, cognitive disorders, and paroxysmal symptoms. So as I said, how to diagnose? Always go to the doctor. The doctor will do tests for you, which can range from blood test, CSF test, as well as the MRI. MRI is very important, which we'll be discussing in the panel discussion, which will help us in diagnosing MS, ruling out mimics which can cause MS-like disorder, as well as if you're on therapy, to see whether you're responding to therapy or not. Also, we utilize these investigations. Finally, I just want you people to focus on this slide. So if you see up to 2000, there was just 3 medications which were available for MS. By 2010, another 3 got added up. But in the last 5 years, you see there are more than 20 medications which are available. And the efficacy, which was just around 30% in the initial period, has gone up to 70 to 90%. That is very important. What I want to emphasize here is that do not lose hope in diagnosed with MS. Many medications are there which are targeted either at the purple phase or the orange phase. But the ultimate goal is to see that you are treated adequately and you try to live as much normal as possible. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Netravati, for this brief introduction regarding the various aspects of multiple sclerosis. So, coming to the next part of the session, that is panel discussion. So, as a doctor and a healthcare personnel, I think we always aim to treat the patient and not just the disease. So, I believe a doctor's primary job is not just to treat the disease, but to care for how the affected person feel and how they function. So in this regard, I am very happy that we at NIMHANS have a multidisciplinary team to care for the complex needs of a person affected with MS as well as their caregivers. The core function of a multidisciplinary team is to bring together a group of healthcare professionals from different fields in order to determine an optimal, feasible, and an acceptable treatment plan for the patient. So a multidisciplinary team for the management of multiple sclerosis usually consists of a neurologist, then a neuro-ophthalmologist, urologist, psychiatrist, neuroradiologist, neuropsychiatrist, and apart from this, there will be psychiatrist, social worker, neurorehabilitation, integrative medicine specialist, and also nursing group, so that we can, this team will aim to plan a treatment protocol. These are all these people are equally important in the decision, holistic approach and treatment of a patient with multiple sclerosis. So for this panel discussion, I'm delighted to have representation from our multidisciplinary team involved in the care of patients with multiple sclerosis at NIMHANS. So at first, I welcome Dr. Netravati, Additional Professor of Neurology at NIMHANS, to moderate and chair this session. I welcome Dr. Geeta Desai, Professor of Psychiatry from the Department of Psychiatry. I welcome Dr. Priya Trisa Thomas, Additional Professor from the Department of Psychiatric Social Worker. I welcome Dr. Anupam Gupta, Professor and Head, Department of Neurorehabilitation. I welcome Dr. Shriram Varamballi, Professor of Psychiatry and Head of the Department of Integrative Medicine, and Dr. Kishore Kumar, Assistant Professor of Ayurveda from the Department of Integrative Medicine. I also welcome Dr. Maya Bhatt, Additional Professor from Department of Neuroimaging and Interventional Radiology. And I welcome Dr. Shankla Hegde, Neuropsychologist from the Department of Clinical Neuropsychology. So I note to all the participants, if any of the participants wants to ask any questions, they can do so in the chat box, or they can raise your hand. We'll take up your questions one by one. So I hand over to Dr. Netravati to chair and moderate this session. Thank you.
Thanks, Vikram. As Vikram mentioned, it's indeed nice to have a multidisciplinary team in the care of people with multiple sclerosis. So the next few minutes, let us discuss about the various difficulties experienced by a person with MS. I request the audience to keep their questions generalized to all than being individualistic, and kindly post it on the chat box so that we will take it eventually. So we'll start the panel discussion. Being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, most of the time what happens is, as I said, emphasized that we need to do investigations so that we diagnose MS as well as rule out a MS mimic. Dr. Maya, I would want to ask you this question about what do you think is the role of imaging in a patient with multiple sclerosis?
Yeah, when we say imaging, we are specifically here referring to MRI, that is magnetic resonance imaging. And it is not limited to a single role, but it involves a varied approach. So let us take the first scenario, wherein you have a patient whose diagnosis is clear-cut on clinical signs and symptoms. In such patients also, we need to do an initial MRI of the brain and the spine to confirm the diagnosis. Because MRI is a very sensitive tool to diagnose multiple sclerosis, though it's not very specific. The sensitivity is around, say, 94 to 95%. Then the second scenario is when you have a clinically isolated syndrome. So here MRI is a part of the diagnostic criteria, wherein you have dissemination in time and dissemination in space as part of the defining criteria. So here we look for hyperintense lesions basically in the brain, and you have criteria for that. Then the third scenario is when you have a mimics of MS, wherein the scenario is very kind of atypical, where it is not straightforward. And you're trying to rule out other mimics like you have migraine or any vascular event or any other autoimmune disorder like say MOG or your spectrum disorders. So this scenario also we need to image the patient. The fourth scenario is where you have patients who have been diagnosed, but you want to prognosticate these patients depending upon the lesion load, like the lesions which you see on T2 or the T1 white hole or black hole, sorry. So this is the fourth scenario. The fifth scenario is patients who have been diagnosed and are being treated. So they need to be followed up with MRI according to certain guidelines. And the fifth and not the least is when the patient is on treatment for multiple sclerosis, he or she may develop certain complications due to the drugs like PML or some infections, opportunistic infections, etc. So in this scenario also, we need to do MRI for these patients. I would just end by saying that the initial MRI which needs to be done should preferably be done on a 3 Tesla machine, usually should be done on the same machine repeatedly with a fixed protocol. The first MRI should include the brain and the spine, and gadolinium agent or the gadolinium dye needs to be injected in these patients.
Thanks, Maya. So basically what Maya was trying to say is that apart from diagnosis, 2 other things to rule out other disorders which can appear as MS, and the other thing is about prognostication and whether the medication is being effective. Thanks, Maya. So my next question is to Dr. Geeta. What do you think? I listed out so many of the issues, did not go into much of the details about them. But in your experience, what do you think are the various mental health issues with a person with?
I think probably this is one condition where mental health is of prime importance. The reason being, many of the symptoms can actually be part of mental health symptoms like mood disturbances, could be part of the illness itself, MS episode itself, or sometimes even at least a small percentage of them can actually present only with mental health symptoms in MS. I think that is one thing. The second thing is many of the symptoms that the persons with MS experience, like tingling, numbness, can sometimes be as labeled as psychological. And I think they might end up getting a psychiatric diagnosis rather than having MS diagnosis. The most common things, mental health issues are, depression and anxiety. I think they have been the most common conditions that have been associated with MS. The one, it could be part of the MS itself because of the changes in the brain, the person may experience depression, or it could be a psychological reaction to receiving a diagnosis like MS. Sometimes the symptoms themselves can be very distressing for the person, and it also comes in at the time of your life when you're trying to achieve a lot of your career goals are being made, and you're getting married, or so many things are there at that point of time in your life. So all this could add to their emotional distress. The other thing would be, when we say disorder, we mean, some constellation of signs and symptoms. But many a times what I've seen is they don't have to have everything. It's just, sometimes they may become very angry, get angry very easily, especially during the episode. And this irritability, getting angry very easily, can have implication that you get angry with your family members, and then that can lead to distress within the family as well as for the person with MS. The other conditions that have been noted with MS is sometimes persons can cry and laugh without a very good reason, and it's not in their control, and that can be a very distressing symptom for the family as well as for the person, because they are unable to understand why it is happening to them. The other thing, when sometimes the depression can be very serious and it can become very severe if it is not addressed. I do understand that, as we are all aware, depression can sometimes be a reason for self-harm. That means, suicide. So it is noted that in persons with MS, these kind of ideas can also be there. So it's very pertinent that we recognize it early and then treat it.
Thanks, Dr. Geeta. Dr. Geeta basically tried to emphasize that the most common would be the depression and anxiety. And Madam has carried out few studies at NIMHANS to study what are the mental health issues in a person with MS. Now, I would like to just ask about, which is very much related to what Dr. Geeta said to Dr. Shantala. What do you think? I think you're also being involved in studies at NIMHANS looking at the neurocognitive aspects in people with MS. So, can I know your experience here?
So, as Dr. Netra and Dr. Geeta has already emphasized, the brain gets affected, and along with the brain is the behavior as well as the important neurocognitive functions. Now, what do we mean by neurocognitive functions? These are all the functions that help us interact with the environment, cope with the environment, and carry out our day-to-day function, like attention, processing speed, or our ability to plan, take decisions, think about the future, have insight into our own limitations. So these are host of brain functions that gets affected in several neurological conditions. And in multiple sclerosis, especially as Dr. Netra already explained to you about the myelin chain, the processing speed gets affected. And nearly 65 to 70% of patients who are diagnosed with multiple sclerosis experience more than one domain of neurocognitive deficits. Now, these deficits are important to be evaluated at different time points. Once the diagnosis is made, to know to what extent these functions are affected. And also when we have remissions or at the course of the illness, we repeat these assessments to see if those neurocognitive functions are progressively deteriorating or maintaining or are status quo. Why is this important? Why? Because many of our patients, when they come to us, as I explained, this illness is often observed in the second decade or the third decade at the prime of your life. And are not just day-to-day functioning, but often occupational functioning gets affected. So your dreams to perhaps take further of your career or other functions, academic pursuits, can get disrupted. What gets complicated is the symptom itself in terms of anxiety and depression. So this in turn can also impact your neurocognitive functions. So as a psychologist, as a neuropsychologist, we evaluate not only your neurocognitive functions, but also evaluate your mood and the interaction between the two and ways to handle this. The other important point that we keep in mind when we are doing neurocognitive functions is to see how it impacts your overall quality of life. And also look at rehabilitation. So neuropsychological rehabilitation is the newer method that's being explored to address these neurocognitive deficits. In one of our study, which we carried out recently, what we're exploring is that anxiety and the depression also predates sometimes the onset. So the trait anxiety seems to be high in patients who have been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. This is something that still a lot more research that needs to be done to understand the myriad ways in which it affects the overall psychological.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Shantala. Before we go on, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Professor Tissa. He is from Australia, Chair of WFN Public Awareness and Advocacy Committee, who has joined us. Thank you, sir. After the panel discussion, we will take your questions towards you also. Thank you. So now we heard from both Geeta as well as Shantala as to how much the mental health issues can be impacted. So this can not just affect a person, it can also affect the family, the caregivers. So Priya, what is your observation? What is the impact of the psychosocial aspect you think in a person with MS?
Thank you, Dr. Netra. Hi, everyone. It is important in a chronic illness like multiple sclerosis, as all of us are aware, that to take care of psychological and social needs also. It is not just neurological, it's not just the medical and walking and autonomic disturbances. It is also the mental health issues and the neurocognitive issues. And inevitably, this has a certain impact on the interpersonal relationships, the life cycle. Every life cycle, we need to achieve certain things. The disease impacts our achievement of a pregnancy, marriage, occupational functioning, how we are able to go forward in our life, achievement of certain tasks. So it is important for each one of us as team members to acknowledge this. It is also important for each affected individual and the family members to recognize that there is a possibility of multiple areas of influence in a disease like multiple sclerosis. The uncertainty associated with the disease, from the time the symptoms start, the delay that happens in getting a proper diagnosis, and then we do not know what to expect next. How much improvement is going to happen with a particular treatment, whether it is going to help or not. And as we grow older, as we go forward in our life cycle, what happens in the disease, when the next relapse will happen or not. These are all certain uncertain situations that adds on to the emotional distress and adds on to the family coping also, like influences the family coping also. So individual is important, the biological issues are important, psychological, social issues are important. family becomes very important because all of us are very closely interwoven with our social support systems. We are all part of social fabric. So when there is an illness, it doesn't really end in one person alone. It affects the families, it affects the larger communities, the workplace. All these things are important. It is important to acknowledge it, and it is also important to seek help when it is needed. In a family, give MS only as much as place as is needed. Don't give it more place than needed. That becomes very important.
I think that is a very good message from Priya Thomas. Give MS the space only what is required, not more than that. Give more space to your family, your caregivers. I think that should be the message we need to realize. So I think being a neuropsychiatric hospital, many of you have seen as to how much there can be effect on both the neurological aspect as well as the mental, cognitive, psychosocial aspects. So let us just go on to the physical disability. Dr. Anupam Gupta, I would like to ask you, what do you think? How do you think a person with a spasticity, especially in a progressive form, should be managed?
Yes, spasticity. Good afternoon, everybody. Spasticity is very important, especially in patients who are having spinal cord syndrome. And we have to understand, first of all, it is very common. Second, it's not always bad. There are good signs. You can use spasticity in these patients, especially in the lower limb, the patients with multiple sclerosis having spasticity. You can use it for locomotion. It prevents the osteoporosis in the long term. DVT stops. So there are some good aspects of spasticity. There are some bad aspects of spasticity, like the patient is having pain. Hygiene problem is there, especially if you have adductor muscle contractures are there. Pain, sleeplessness because of the pain. So spasticity is to its own. There are some good points, there are some bad points. The best way to manage spasticity long term is doing range of motion exercise. Probably low limb spasticity, patient is made to stand, walk. That is the best anti-spastic medication. With upper limb, probably you have to focus more on range of motion exercises. That apart, then if the patient is having generalized spasticity, you may have to go for medications like baclofen. You can take it up to 70 to 80 milligrams per day divided doses, depending upon the severity of spasticity, or some other drugs like tizanidine or dalperisone. So if generalized spasticity, you may have to treat it with pharmacotherapy if retaining the range of motion exercise and ambulation and all these issues are not working. The last 15 to 20 years for focal spasticity management, we have chemical neurolysis, which has become very common. Developing countries like India, few centers are using phenol and alcohol. But I believe most of the doctors in tertiary centers are using botulinum toxin, which we also use a lot. So if you want to use the botulinum toxin for management of focal spasticity, so that would help you. If the patient is having spasticity in the presence of motor power, then it is much more useful. Patient is able to, because the tightness is gone, dexterity is improved, patient is able to do functioning. If the patient is having dance paralysis, then probably reducing the spasticity would be helpful in fitment of splints, cosmetic purpose. So the roles would change depending upon associated features with spasticity, like patient is having dance paralysis or patient is having partial recovery. Certain patients, especially paraplegic, who are not responding to the oral medication, botulinum toxin is not possible because you have a lot of key muscles involved and you have limitation with the dose every time. Intrathecal baclofen is a good option, but we have seen in our setup like NIMHANS, you are not able to convince the patient because the cost is so much. You have to invest a lot, and then the recurring cost after every 6 months you have to refill the pump and do that. But we have seen in the Western world, intrathecal baclofen is very commonly used for management of long-term spasticity as multiple sclerosis. And in some intractable cases, which we have not come across, probably nothing else is not working. Patient is having fixed contractures and having consequences because of that. Exceptional cases, maybe you may have to go for surgical management, like doing tenotomies and fractional lengthening of the standards. That's how you manage this process.
Thanks, Dr. Anupam. I think one of the way is, first of all, prevention towards a progressive form by using the medications in the early period so that you keep them in the RRMS stage itself. But even after you develop a low limb weakness, it's not that just conservative therapies are available. There are multiple options which are available, ranging from chemical neurolysis up to Botox and sometimes orthotics also. I think that is a very nice thing.
And I think one of the gem of NIMHANS has been to have the yoga and integrative medicine in here, not just for NIMHANS, also for India, which has actually strengthened. Because if you see the MS, we do not know. One of the questions, in the chat box is, what are the causes of MS? I try to tell in my slides that we do not know. I think that would be more better. There is a genetic predisposition we do not know, but we know that stress is going to be something which is going to worsen or cause a relapse. I think for that stress, one of the way to combat would be yoga. So, Dr. Shivram, what is your experience? What do you think? How is the efficacy of yoga in a patient managing a person with multiple sclerosis?
Thank you, Dr. Netra. One thing I would like to say is, as Dr. Anupam was saying, exercise as well as yoga is very important to give the patient a sense of control. Otherwise, in a medical diagnosis, you're running around, doctor gives you medicine, various people tell you to do various things, and you simply do it. You are just a passive agent. Whereas with yoga and physical exercise as well, you have a sense of control that I am doing something to get my illness better. And that's a very, very powerful thing for somebody who is feeling helpless. As regards yoga, there are actually now nearly 10 randomized controlled trials and a couple of meta-analyses which have showed that yoga can have benefits, particularly in the quality of life. And as Dr. Netra was mentioning, the stress levels in these patients. NIMHANS, for example, has developed a validated yoga module after discussing with a lot of yoga therapists who are actually treating patients with MS. And we have made two kinds of modules. For people who are able to walk, we do the exercise or the yoga with the wall support. And for people who have a higher disability on the EDSS, we have a module where people can do it on the chair or on the bed also. So yoga is possible for even people who are bedridden. And of course, not all the yogasanas can be done. For example, Surya Namaskar, which is a very common thing, may not be possible for most patients with MS. So we generally include only simple and low to moderate intensity exercises. For example, joint loosening exercises, balancing, which is a very important part in MS, Vrikshasana or Tadasana, which can be fairly easily done by most people, which help in balance. One, I think, is bladder and bowel continence, for which Mula Bandha, which is a specific lock exercise which can be practiced, which helps improve bladder control, and of course relaxation, which is an important part of any yoga. So the approximately around 40 to 50 minutes, 3 times a week would be a good way to help people with multiple sclerosis. And we are also running, courses for yoga therapists to learn what yoga to teach and what not to teach for different neurological disorders. But the most important message is that the person feels that I am doing something to control my illness, and that helps many people with their confidence as well as reducing their stress level.
Thanks, Dr. Shivram. So you have seen that at NIMHANS, we have a multidisciplinary team which not just focuses on the neurocognitive aspects, psychosocial aspect, rehabilitation, yoga. We also have the Ayurveda facility here. So, Dr. Kishore, what do you think? How has Ayurveda contributed to the management of multiple sclerosis?
Thank you, Dr. Netra. The Department of Integrative Medicine and the facility, Ayurveda facility, has recently started here. We have been associating ourselves with the MS clinic, especially Dr. Netra. We've been also treating patients of MS who attend our special clinics. Basically, there are some small questions which people have on Ayurveda as to what is MS known as in Ayurveda. Basically, Ayurveda doesn't, the classics of Ayurveda written around 5,000 years ago have been able to tell us the basic pathophysiology in terms of doshas. And they say whatever disease manifests with the involvement of doshas, please name them. So, the multiple sclerosis per se is known as Vata Vyadhi. It's known as Sarvanga Vata, and based on whichever area is affected, the disease is named. The treatment, pathophysiology, as Dr. Netra was describing, the inflammation and the effects of inflammation in causation of the disease and the neurological deficits that remain after the inflammatory phase is gone. All these have been explained in detail. The treatment of MS in Ayurveda in both the stages, in the active inflammatory phase as well as post-inflammatory phase we have. During the inflammatory phase, it is the treatment wherein we use the Panchakarma therapies for reducing the inflammation, which is inflammation is known as ama or avarana. So once this is gone, the treatment for Vata, that is Vata Vyadhi, is initiated. So in both the phases, we have good results. I have a follow-up of a patient since 15 years who've been every year taking Panchakarma therapies, specifically Basti. Basti is a rectal administration of medications in Ayurveda. It's a part of Panchakarma, and who have not had, the lady has not had a relapse till now. So inflammatory phase as well as deficit when the patient is in neurological deficit phase. Now here we have been able to plan integrative treatment for patients suffering from MS, wherein the active inflammatory phase, the conventional treatment is given. Then we slowly start adding Ayurveda, and we have 2 to 3 patients who have been coming for follow-up since around 6 to 7 months after we got associated with MS, who's doing quite well. The progression of the disease has not been there as much it would be otherwise. So Ayurveda has effective treatment for multiple sclerosis. We do not have much publications from India in Ayurveda appearing in various journals. There are many animal studies where Raksha, that is the grape, and curcumin, and ashwagandha and so on. Such herbs have been tried in mouse models of multiple sclerosis with very good results. Clinical studies have not been there, unfortunately. We would be very happy in documenting this and publishing such studies from the hands. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Kishore. I think many of them have asked multiple questions. Few of them have already been discussed. Many of them have asked on the medications, side effects, different injectables and oral. I just want to tell, we have created a WhatsApp group, as you people are aware. So we will try to address all this on that and not in this public forum. One of the questions which has been asked is whether MS comes under the Disability Act. Yes. The RPWD Act takes MS as one of the rare disorders, and there is a way how a person's disability can be taken, not just the motor disability, even the cognitive, psychosocial, and how it impacts a person in the activities of daily living. All that is taken. Some people have also asked on what are the different exercises and yoga, meditation to be done. I think as Dr. Shiva mentioned, yoga modules have been developed, and whenever you visit your doctor, please consult them. They will be able to help you out in this. Some of the questions has been on pregnancy, and I think these, it depends on which medications you're taking. So few of them have effect on pregnancy, few of them do not have. So that can be addressed at the individual level. But what I want to tell is 2 questions which has been asked, whether my child can get affected. I think that is very important. We try to say that this is not a genetically mediated disorder. This, you have only a genetic predisposition. So like your parents did not have, but you have developed. So it is just one in a cause. But if there is a family history, then the risk increases. So it depends on who in the family is having. Even then, the risk is just 0.1 to 5%. Otherwise, there is no familial. So it does not mean you have MS, your child is going to. That you should remember. One of the questions which a person has asked is why there are no generic drugs which are there. As I showed in my this one, medications have been evolving, and among the 27 medications which are there are only few which are available in India. So I think it is just a matter of time when the generics start coming. Few of the oral medications which were not there 2 years back, generics have already come to the oral medications. And like that only maybe injectables also will come in the future. So one question which I would want to ask, which has come in the panel multiple times, is towards Dr. Geeta. This has come in 3 people have asked. One is their spouse is having anxiety issues, anger issues, and some of them have a suicidal tendencies. So what would you recommend to them? Are there any therapies? These have been asked.
I think, first let me deal with the anxiety question. There are very evidence-based therapies that are available for anxiety. First is about identifying what could be the potential sources of anxiety. Like I said, it can be disease itself, or it could be arising out of the way the psychological issues that are arising out of the illness, or it could be treatment related. First, you identify what are the sources of anxiety. Depending on the severity, we advise whether medications would help in taking care of the anxiety. If the mild to moderate anxiety, there are therapies like cognitive behavior therapy, which can help you in coping with anxiety, where you identify the sources of anxiety, learn how to relax, making changes in the way you are responding to certain cues and thoughts. That is one way of, and there are mindfulness practices that are also available. I think one of the chat was about use of mindfulness, and I think there's good evidence also for these kind of interventions. Now, second thing is about suicidality. I think that is an important and a serious issue. I would seek help, inform your doctor immediately, so there is a proper assessment of suicidal, thoughts and ideas are being done, whether it is because of underlying depression or it is coming out of the sources. So they would, a proper and immediate evaluation is very, very important to address this issue.
Thanks, Dr. Geeta. Few of the questions which have come are on vaccines. Most of the vaccines can be taken. There is no problem. It can be either of the available vaccine, Covishield or Covaxin, which is available, and Sputnik can also be taken. Before taking, kindly consult your neurologist, because there is a timing between the taking of the vaccine and few of the injectables. Otherwise, with most of the oral medications, you can take the vaccine. And please take the vaccine. That is the only way I'll be able to remove, you will be able to remove this mask and we can be free. Vaccination is the only way to prevent the third, fourth, fifth waves. Vaccine is a must. Kindly consult your doctor and take the vaccine. Few of them have asked, you emphasized on MRI, use of MRI, but because of pandemic, many have not been able to go to get the MRI done. I agree. I actually wanted to ask Dr. Maya about this. Of course, the MRI will not be able to come to your house. But what we can do is you can always have a tele-consultation with your doctor. So it's not that always MRI is required for your disability assessment or to see whether your medications are helping you. It can also be done clinically also. So at least until the pandemic is over. But eventually, when you're vaccinated and the pandemic has slightly ebbed down, and it would be the right time to go back to your neurologist and consult so that the MRI can be done. Few of them also have given few very motivational messages telling that I'm very happy, I'm willing to fight. I think just seeing the number of participants which are there just tells that you're not alone. There are many people along with you, and we are all there with you people in the fight to see that how we can control multiple sclerosis. So now I would like to ask a few of the questions which have been there. Dr. Geeta has asked, Priya, because we were asking about the COVID and the vaccines, what has been your experience in this COVID pandemic in managing people with MS?
Thanks for that. COVID, as we all know, has been a game changer in the way we are able to support all of us in healthcare. So in our institute, we have to support demyelinating disorders patients, we have been attempting to reach out with support from neurology department, the psychiatric social department, and the medical records, trying to reach out to establish a continuum of care. To many of you in the group would have received phone calls from us during the COVID phase, because as the earlier question was demonstrated, it was very difficult. It is very difficult still to reach out to a clinical setting for a detailed clinical evaluation because of the COVID restrictions. So during that time, we have been able to reach out to many of you through our telephonic care coordination process. And we will try to continue to do that till the COVID becomes a thing of the past. We hope that you will be able to reach out to us in the different ways that we have been able to tell you and seek help from all of us. As and when COVID becomes a past thing, we hope that more multidisciplinary support you can all receive from us.
Thanks, Priya. I think that was one of the efforts done by this multidisciplinary team. When the pandemic started, we knew that many of you people were on medications and did not know how to go about and how to consult. And I think the telephonic call which was done helped in many of them to talk to us, to our students, and alleviating at least their stress and anxiety level for a time. Many people have asked, based on your question, Dr. Shivram, about the yoga modules, whether it is available and how they can access it.
This particular yoga module, of course, we have not published it. We have recently validated it. But you can actually, we have a website, yoganimans.in. I think somebody put it on the chat box as well, where we have a list of the yoga modules, and you are very welcome to write to us. The only caution I would want to say here is that just like any other treatment, it is not probably a good idea to try and do it yourself. You would need a therapist, a person who understands both yoga and the limitations of the patient to teach it. Because many people want to do it from YouTube or a video. It's not very advisable. Of course, it may be possible that after 2 or 3 sessions, you can try to do it yourself. But initially, I would recommend you learn it from a therapist. And you are please very welcome to contact the department at the website. We have our email and our phone numbers. You can visit that website, nimansyoga.in. nimansyoga.in. You can write to us and we will respond back to you.
Thanks, Shivram, for being helpful in this. So, MS not just affects the weakness, having urogenital problems, it also has a lot of effect on the memory thought processes. So, just want to ask, Maya, what do you think is the role of imaging in cognitive studies in multiple sclerosis?
This would be the other aspect of imaging. The first instance, we saw how it played a role in the diagnosis and treatment of individual patients. So here, what we do in imaging is we tabulate and collate multiple imaging parameters, and then we try to correlate them with the cognitive functions. So this is more of a research module kind of thing. So in this, we use both conventional features as well as advanced techniques have been done. A lot of studies are there, different over the last 15 years or so. So the conventional features which we correlate with cognitive function are maybe something called as corpus callosum index, or we see the volume load of the lesions in MS, or even the volumes of the ventricles, that is the cavities within the brain. So all these, the measurements of these structures, they are correlated with their cognitive functions, and a correlation has been derived from them. Then we have used advanced techniques like MP ratios have been used. Then DTI parameters have been used, and they have found that decrease in features like fractional anisotropy, etc., have been found to be decreased in certain areas of the brain, and these patients are known to have cognitive impairment, as compared to healthy normal controls. Similarly, there have been studies wherein certain metabolites, certain chemicals in the brain have been found to be decreased in these patients, and these have also correlated with the cognitive decline. For example, NAA, that is one metabolite which is commonly seen in normal brains, and it is seen to be affected. It is seen to be decreased in certain areas of the brain in these patients, in MS patients. So that has been correlated with the cognitive decline. Similarly, studies have been done wherein fMRI, that is a functional study. All these studies are also functional, but here the patient is told to do certain tasks, and these tasks are then compared with the cognitive test. So it has been found that there is a defect in certain cognitive functions on performing these tests. The other aspect is wherein you compare certain drugs or the different drugs which have been used for treatment in MS, so to see how it matches with the other drug. So therein you are measuring the gray matter volumes. That is, you see if there is a atrophy, in the sense there is a decrease in the volume of the gray matter in the brain. So certain drugs are known to cause more atrophy and certain drugs are known to cause less atrophy. So all these are statistically done, and these have got more value in research rather than they cannot be applied to individual patients as such, because these studies cannot be reproduced across machines, and there will be always the differences in between the same patient also when it is performed on different scanners and at different times.
Thanks, Dr. Maya. So basically what we need to remember is if we start the medications early and if you take the correct treatment, the cognitive aspect also won't be there. And even when it starts with the correct therapy, these can be controlled to a large extent. But apart from therapies, there can be even some neuropsychological therapies which can help. Dr. Shantala, would you want to enumerate us on that as to how to improve the cognition in the person with MS?
Yeah. So the good thing about human brain, as I initially said, the human brain is very important, right, to carry out all our cognitive functions. The beauty of the brain is it can also improve itself, just like how yoga, physical exercise can help us improve not just our bodily functions, it also has an impact on our brain functions. Cognitive functions, brain functions can also be improved through specific exercises. Now, these exercises are designed and they are termed as under the umbrella of neuropsychological rehabilitation. One, these are systematically developed exercises like drill-based exercises to improve attention, memory, especially when I have seen patients with MS. Even when the symptoms have come down or it's under control, they still experience a lot of memory issues, which again in turn have an impact on their overall functioning. So certain specific exercises can help to improve these neural connections that we say, the interconnections between the different brain areas. The other important thing in neuropsychological rehabilitation is that we not only address the neurocognitive functions, but in a holistic rehabilitation, we address the person's emotional condition, the mood, anxiety. So other methods like cognitive behavior therapy, mindfulness therapy, music-based interventions are being explored and have greater potential both on the research side as well as on the clinical application phase to see how best we can improve these neurocognitive functions even after the illness has been very much under control. So that's very, very important. And as Dr. Netra mentioned, our aim is to reduce the relapse. Our aim is to help you keep your anxiety levels, stress levels under control, because stress can in turn have a negative impact on the overall condition. So it's important to keep a check on your anxiety and depression and mood, which in turn has an impact on your neurocognitive function. They're all interconnected. So it's important to understand these interconnections and how it impacts not just the self, but also the immediate environment, the family environment. So all these are addressed in neuropsychological rehabilitation.
Thank you, Shantala. I think the basic strength of MAS has been the neuropsychiatric evaluations which are done. So there's a holistic approach which is there here. So just not the neurologists, we try to address the cognitive aspect, the psychosocial aspect, and the depression, anxiety. And not just the person, we also try to treat the family, the caregivers. And also apart from the medical therapies, for both the neurological and psychiatric aspects, we have a lot of rehabilitation, the integrated medicine. And I'm really feeling nice to have this multidisciplinary team here addressing to various concerns with multiple sclerosis. And I would like just all of you to just give a message for our people with MS. We can just start with Dr. Anupam.
As you have must have understood by now out of this discussion, it has a lot of domains, and a lot of domains have been enumerated by Dr. Netra. So if you want to address all these domains, you would be requiring a multidisciplinary care. Give due importance to everything. Continue with your medications, continue with your therapies. Try to address aspects like cognitive aspects, psychiatric aspects, your mobility issues, balance related issues, or spasticity issues, bladder bowel, sexual issues, because a lot of multiple sclerosis patients develop it at a very younger age. And in enhance out of our experience, we have seen spinal cord syndrome patients that they do not want to talk about the sexual issues. They have a lot in mind, they don't want to talk about it. We try to train them about sexual issues. So bladder, bowel, sexual are very important issues. And unless you discuss them, we cannot help you. So all these issues need to be addressed. I think Women's is a good place to address most of your concerns if you are a multiple sclerosis.
Yeah. Yeah, my message will be to find time for family because we are all in this together. The individual and the family will work together to have a better quality of life. All these messages that we have given, it has to be sustained within the family environment. So all the very best to all of us.
Mental health is a very important component of your overall health. No health without mental health. So it's important to be aware of your emotions. It's necessary to share your negative emotions. Talk to your doctors. Talk to your, support system people about what you're feeling. Reach out. I think it's very important.
Thanks, Geeta. Shantala?
I'm so glad that many of you have joined this meeting, and I'm sure you've gained from whatever little we could share in this limited time. So my message is you have had MS and I'm sure you will fight it through. So in and around you, if you have other people who you think are suffering from MS, I think you should also build strength, build that community and say that we can always be, we can overcome this through support and helping each other out. So there's no stigma attached to any of these illnesses. It's okay to seek help. It's okay to feel low. It's okay to feel these symptoms that you experience, which is all part of the illness, and nothing to blame self for whatever it is.
What I would like to say is that you are not alone in this. We are all there with you as a team. And as Dr. Shantala said, please reach out and spread this awareness that this is not the end of the road. There is definitely hope.
I would like to just say that please remember MS is not your life, it's just one part of your life. If possible, make it the smallest part of your life and don't forget the rest of your life in fighting this disorder. And as you saw today, you are not alone. There are lakhs of people who are fighting this disorder. Hope you will also do it and succeed. Thank you.
Dr. Kishore?
नित्यं हिताहार विहार सेवी समीक्षकारी विषयेषु सक्तः दाता समः सत्यपरः आप्तोपसेवी भवत्यरोगः नित्यं हित आहार विहार सेवी हित आहार is food, vihara is behavior. Samikshakari, be think and do before you do anything. Vishayeshu asaktah, do not indulge in too much into anything. Data samaha, give equal opportunity to everyone. Satyapara, be truthful. Such a person you will not get any disease. So anoho badraha kritavo yantu vishwataha. As per Rigveda, Hands is a place where you will get treatment from all disciplines, including yoga, Ayurveda, modern medicine, and so on. So you can seek help from us and follow the right way of life. you will be able to get over any disease that might hinder your journey of life. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for giving their message. So I just want to tell to all the people with MS that we are all there with you. Never feel alone. Connect with your family, connect with your work, connect with your passion, connect with your dreams. Connect with your doctor and therapist. We were not able to address many of the questions, but we'll try to do it eventually. Thank you.